What's a small hill you're willing to die on that some people might just think is trivial?
That manifestation is bullshit, and action is the only thing that matters.
Wouldn't you say that manifestation is the first step before action?
So it depends on how we define manifestation. So if we define manifestation as like an electrical signal occurs in your brain, sure. But I don't think that's how most people describe it. So I would say be totally on board with manifestation if we define it as knowing that. Like, I know that this is possible. Like I saw this or I have some perspective that has changed. To me, that's just knowledge. So if you have knowledge that you can start a bank, you have to have the knowledge that you can start a bank before you start a bank. That makes sense. So fine. But the bank doesn't occur until you take the action. But the idea of like the mindless ideation of like, I'm going to manifest my husband into existence is, I think, relatively bullshit. Now, that being said, there's some people who do that and then also take actions that then change their circumstances, and then they get the husband and then they misattribute what was the thing that caused it. And so for me, I think, fundamentally the position that I'm in is trying to identify causal relationship as accurately as possible. And so, the logical proof that I use with this is just simply mindset plus no action, no outcome. Mindset plus action, outcome. No mindset, action, outcome. So the action is really going to be the only thing that's going to.
I would argue that
create
you
the
need
outcome.
mindset. You need some sort of mindset to have the action. Like I'm kind of big into manifestation,
Yeah.
so it's interesting for
That
me
was
to
my
hear your
hell die on.
perspective.
There you go.
Like to me, like the example of
People get so upset by this, by the way, when I bring
I
this
find it really interesting.
What's
So,
their main contention?
Well, they have a history of being reinforced for talking to other people about manifestation. And so they want to talk about have other people nod and smile and agree with them. And those are all pro-social behaviors. And so I think it makes sense that they would do that. Again, it depends on how we define manifestation, which I've yet to find anyone who's been able to define it well. Action you can define really easily. And so that's the part, right? So it's really just this word that has all these positive connotations.
I just think it helps you with focus.
But like,
It
what is
helps you-
manifestation?
Let's say let's just say the boyfriend girlfriend example,
Okay.
where you manifest the perfect.
But what is manifestation?
You thinking clearly about your wants, needs, goals, what to look for, who this
So
person
prioritization.
is. Correct. Now, by manifesting that, you're going to be on the lookout for those sort of
But
qualities.
is the manifesting
in
the
another person.
prioritization or we said prioritization and then manifesting?
So I think the problem is that you're kind of using a derivative definition
Right.
of prioritization.
This is
and then
fundamentally
this-
why I have an issue with it.
And then because you're using manifestation to indicate some sort of data or information, a lot of people that have a different definition of manifestation are going to apply that to their definition of
I just
manifestation.
think people
and
know
it's
what
gonna-
manifestation is.
No,
It's
they
just-
don't.
I
That's
think
actually
a
my
lot of
point.
People think like you sit down and you manifest something and then they think it's going to walk right through that door. Like they think that cosmically everything will just like somehow bestow.
Like
whatever
law of
you manifest.
attraction,
I think
I don't
that's doing better than nothing. But
I don't think so
that
because there's data that shows that you can trigger the same dopamine receptors when you think about getting $1 billion than when you get $1 billion. Like it's a similar thing. Obviously, it's going to be a lot less intense when you think about it, but when you daydream about all these amazing things that are happening, it doesn't actually change the reality of your existence.
I
It's
think
only giving you small dopamines.
when you could get yourself to have a firm belief that something is going to happen and that nothing is going to get in the way, your actions are going to be reinforced by that.
Well, the action is the only thing that will matter.
I think there's got to be a belief in yourself to stick with those actions.
You have declarative knowledge, but also those are skills. And so, so if someone tries 100 times versus 10 times, I would say the fact that they took more action is the reason they got to where they're trying to go. Now, when we try to get to why did they do that? I don't think anyone has the answer to that. I think the reason for that is because no one knows why they do
I
it.
think they have a core belief in what they're doing.
So
that
in fairness,
that dealing is going to have an outcome.
To defend Graham, when
Sure.
I first reached out to Graham to try to provide
Well, you
value to him.
manifested this.
Exactly. I sat in my room like
You
this.
manifested this podcast.
So
Yeah.
I had no skills
Yeah.
whatsoever. The only thing that I had was high confidence in my aptitude and competence. Like I knew that I could provide value, but it was more of just like something that existed in my brain. I don't know if I necessarily had evidence to support that.
Sure.
I just knew that I was competent enough. And so maybe I manifested that. One could argue that.
So the big, zooming all the way out here, just for context, I think the reason that people get really up in arms about it is because, these are dogmas, right? These are belief systems which people operate at their very core, which really just means ways of being, which means ways of behaving, and ways of talking is included in that in terms of behavior. But people have a very hard time defining what the hell they're talking about when we ask some of these words that are amorphous. And so I have, by and large, just removed them from my vocabulary so that I can describe the observable. And it has been probably the single most productive thing that I have done in my career. And so, is it a small hill? It is probably the only hill and the main hill that I will die on, which is that behavior rules everything. And you have a history of past, reinforcers or punishers for a set of behaviors, and you repeat them in the future. And that's the only thing that I will say about why someone does something. You've been rewarded in the past for reaching out to people for doing things. And it can be cross-domain. So it's like maybe you reached out to girls and they was able to jump into business, and you were able to reach out to business owners. So it was